Hi friends, how are you? I'm Nicole and this is Crimes with Cole. So, hello. How are you guys doing today? I hope you guys all are having an amazing day, have had an amazing week, and are ready for the weekend and another crazy crime story. In today's case, we are going to be talking about a case of a young girl and guy whose lives were taken on New Year's Day back in 1988, and just how horrible of a job the police did at trying to solve this case. The investigation to really find out who did this, who took Olivia's life, was so poorly done. It's a miracle that her family didn't just look themselves, because I'm most certain they would have done a better job than the police department. So let's get into today's case. This is the case of Olivia Hope. Olivia Hope was a young girl. She's 17 years old, and she wanted to go out for New Year's Eve with her friends in 1987. She, along with a group of friends, had decided to wrap up the year of 1987 on a yacht that would be near Marlborough Sounds of New Zealand. This particular place they were at is called the Fernox Lodge, which was set up for everyone to have a great time. They had indoor and outdoor pools and bars, like live music, and it was honestly just really well thought out. So Olivia, along with her sister Amelia and 6 more of their closest friends, all decided to rent a yacht for the night. They were going to just party all day into the hours of the night and then sleep on this yacht. It was a smaller yacht that was named the Tamarack. They arrived around 8 or 9 p.m. to the Fernox Lodge to dock the boat. And as the night went on, more and more people arrived. And you have to remember, they're all on boats that, they can sleep on, but still near the land. So they have all these, smaller boats that come and pick them up and take them wherever they request to go, whether that's to go to the shore to party at the lodge or, to somebody else's boat to have a few drinks with them. But they're all essentially just partying it up. So as the night goes on and the clock strikes midnight, they all have their Happy New Year cheer and drink. Olivia, shortly after that, meets up with a guy by the name of Ben Smart, who is 21. Now, Ben and Olivia actually knew each other before even coming to this party. However, Ben was just kind of celebrating somewhere else and then decided to meet up with Olivia because, it's New Year's Eve. Who really goes to bed a little after midnight? Unless you're me. So Olivia leaves her group of friends to go meet up with Ben. When the time comes for them to finally decide that they want to go to sleep, they flag down a water taxi to take them from the lodge to the Tamarack. When they get on the Tamarack, it is full, extremely full, to the point that there is nowhere for Olivia and Ben to sleep, which really upsets Olivia because she paid to sleep on this boat. That was the entire plan, that the 8 of them all rent this yacht to sleep on for the night, and here it is being occupied by everyone else. So after getting into a bit of a heated argument with some people on this boat, Olivia kind of realizes that, she's fighting a losing battle, and her and Ben decide to just go elsewhere and sleep for the night. So they flagged down a water taxi, except it wasn't really a water taxi. It was one of the barsmen who was using his own boat to help out, any night owls out there that, they needed to find their nest for the night, So he drives up to the Tamarack, and Olivia and Ben get on his little boat. And on this boat was the driver, Olivia and Ben, and 3 other passengers. So 6 people total. When Olivia and Ben got onto the boat, they asked the driver if there would be anywhere that they could sleep for the night, and he basically said no. Like, it's New Year's Eve. Every place is booked up. One of the passengers offered Ben and Olivia to come with him back to his boat to spend the night. And at first, he made the comment that only Olivia could come. Like, you can come stay, but he can't, pointing towards Ben. But then I think once everyone sort of felt like just uncomfortable by his comment, he played it off like it was a joke. And he's like, no, I'm just kidding. Both of you can come back to my boat and sleep. So the driver took them over to this guy's boat, and we'll call him the mystery man. And as Olivia and Ben stood up to get onto this boat, the driver asked them one final time, "Are you sure this is what you want to do? Are you sure you want to go with this man and get on this man's boat?" And they both agreed and said, yeah, it's fine. We'll be fine. Because they've all been drinking. And I think it's safe to say that some of us don't thoroughly think when we drink. But, like I said, they insisted that they were fine and they wanted to get on to the mystery man's boat. So that next morning, the morning of New Year's Day, back on the Tamarack, everyone woke up, got their bearings together, and decided it was time to, get up and get things together. They needed to get this yacht back, except Olivia hadn't shown up yet. So they originally thought, well, she and Ben probably went off and found somewhere else to sleep, and that she and Ben were, essentially doing the same thing, waking up, getting everything together, and then going to head back home. But as the day went on, Olivia and Ben never came back to the Tamarack. And, they were reaching the end time for their rental agreement. So they figured, well, maybe they're just going to go back home from wherever they are. Maybe they didn't plan to come back here to the Tamarack. And I mean, this is back in 1988. So communication was limited, especially when you are out partying on a boat. They just figured they take the Tamarack back, and when they got back home, they would figure out, where Olivia and Ben were. So Amelia, Olivia's sister, finally had gotten back home to her parents' house and told her mom and dad she didn't know where Olivia was. But she was with this guy named Ben. And while they were worried about where she was, they weren't worried to the point that they thought harm had come upon her. They figured she probably just, got a late start. Her and Ben would return here soon. But when the next day came, January 2nd, and Olivia still hadn't made it home, her mom and dad decided to report her missing. And Ben's parents had decided to do the same. Police had quickly connected the two and started asking everyone to come forth with any information about Ben and Olivia, but no one really had any information other than they were both partying together and left together. I mean, it's New Year's Eve. Everyone's drunk, so I don't feel a lot of people were paying attention anyways. If they were, I doubt they really recall any significant information, As the police started questioning all of the staff, they discovered who the barsman was that was driving his boat, acting as a water taxi. It was a man by the name of Guy Wallace. Guy told the police everything that happened that night. He was the most resourceful person the police spoke to, telling them how Ben and Olivia had basically, gone off with a stranger that night and hadn't been seen since. But as this case started to unfold, it was handed off to a detective by the name of Rob Pope. And he decided to switch this case from a missing persons case to a homicide investigation. They had sent divers down near where the Tamarack, along with where Guy had said that he dropped them off to see if they could find anything. They then spoke with Guy to deep lengths, getting every detail of that night since Guy was the last one to see Ben and Olivia alive. Guy said that this mystery man that Ben and Olivia had gotten onto a boat with was a little bit older than the two of them. He had like really scruffy, unkept, long, wavy, messy hair, had like the whole 5 o'clock shadow going on with his facial hair. The boat they had gotten onto was a ketch, which has 2 sails on it and was rather big. It was a rather big boat. Like they had to step up into it. It had a blue stripe all the way around it and a nice big circular window on it. It was really a nice boat, according to Guy. So with this new information, Detective Pope decided to put it out there for the public and asked everyone if they have seen this guy or this boat. You know, do they know anything? They ended up coming up with the first suspect, Scott Watson, who was very into boats himself. He ended up teaching himself how to build a boat and had built his very own first boat. He ended up naming his boat Blade, but Blade looked nothing like the boat that Guy had described. Blade was a boat with 1 sail, not 2. Blade was made out of metal, not wood, and Blade was painted with red and white, not with a blue stripe. They sound pretty polar opposite to me, but, nonetheless, Detective Pope felt it was necessary to really zone in on Scott during this investigation. As he started speaking with everyone that was partying with Scott that night, they gathered quite a few statements saying how Scott was just a drunken fool. Like, he was rude and inappropriate. He kept making insensitive comments to everyone. He was grabbing on girls when they didn't want him to. He had really just turned into that horrible drunk nobody wants to be around. Like they don't have boundaries. Nobody wants to be around them half the time, yet they are so difficult to get to leave. When Detective Pope had looked into Scott's past, he discovered that Scott had a criminal history from when he was a juvenile. He had petty charges like theft and burglary, like assault. Like he got into a fight with his one buddy one night and got an assault charge. But a lot of people just look at it as, like he just went down the wrong path. Like he just had to sort through a few things, you know what I mean? He grew into his adult years. Those were all juvenile charges. The police decided to bring Scott and Scott's sister Sandy down to the police station to question because Sandy had actually been with Scott New Year's Day and a few days after on his boat. So the police wanted to question Sandy about the boat and if there was anything abnormal that she noticed. And of course, she said no. But when they started questioning Scott, they already had their minds made up that he did it. And that's the exact approach they took towards him when questioning him. Scott told them he didn't even know who Olivia and Ben were, that he had been partying till 3 a.m. or so, went back to his boat and wanted to stay up and drink a little longer, but no one wanted to stay up with him. So he decided to go to bed. The police had to let them go, and Detective Pope just felt like Scott was hiding something. So he had bugged his boat, Blade, and his parents' house. And for months, they listened to Scott tell the same story over and over again, which was he stayed up till 3, went to his boat, nobody wanted to party with him, so he went to bed. But the police were so fixated that it was Scott. They refused to listen to any of the details that Guy had told them. The mystery man's boat did not match Scott's. The mystery man's description did not match Scott. And Scott had been saying for months and months the exact same story, but they refused to let it go. They were bound and determined to find a way to gather evidence against Scott. And this started to piss Guy off, because how are they going to sit here and tell him that he isn't remembering it correctly? Not to mention, there were other people who had called in and said that they seen this mystery man's boat with the two sails and the blue stripe they had seen, with the scruffy looking man driving it and a young couple on it. So it wasn't just Guy who had seen this boat and mystery man. But when it came time for all these witnesses to go to court and make a statement, they all of a sudden couldn't remember what they had seen. One witness in particular was Scott's friend, who just happened to have a small weed farm, which is illegal in New Zealand. Now, Scott and his friend had been planning for months that a few days after the new year, Scott would sail over to his friend's house or farm or whatever you want to call it, and they were going to paint his boat blue. They were going to paint Blade. I mean, they had already bought the paint and everything before New Year's Eve. And when the police asked Scott's friend the timeline of these events, of course, he as well just couldn't remember what exactly happened, but he remembered that Scott didn't get there when he said he would, according to the friend. He said Scott didn't show up until like 5 p.m. or so, when in reality, Scott was there around 1 p.m. So it became very suspicious that maybe the police were bribing them so that the police didn't look like fools for hyper-focusing on Scott, where there was no evidence to back up their claim. And the police just clung onto anything they could to keep the spotlight on Scott. A forensic team had searched Scott's boat and said that Scott's boat was rather clean. And the police just took this to an entire new level of manipulation of words. I mean, they made it sound like Scott had went and like deep cleaned his boat in order to hide something. But when the team members, like from the forensic team, the fingerprint guy in particular was called up, and he said his boat really wasn't as clean as the police had made it out to be. I mean, he had a clean boat, but it was like a spring clean type of clean, like, you know, a deep clean. He moved a few things around, he wiped behind them, you know, not a bleach everything to get rid of fingerprints and blood stains type of clean. So once that got shut down, the police came up with their next claim of how they knew Olivia and Ben were trapped on Scott's boat. And they knew this because there were scratch marks near the window on top of the boat. So when you're down in the cabin, the window that is up on the top, well, Scott would use a stick to hold that window open. And, you know, after time and time again of doing that, it started scratching around the window. But the police claimed that those scratch marks were from Ben and Olivia being trapped, trying to claw their way out. I mean, the police were twisting every piece of evidence they could to fit their own narrative. The police even went as far as to have Guy come in to give his description to a sketch artist. And this sketch artist would give Guy 8 different sets of eyes. Ask him to pick which one. 8 different sets of chins. Tell him to pick one. 8 different sets of ears and nose and eyebrows, and, you know, you get the point. He went through and he picked all of these characteristics. And then the artist would sketch it all up. Except when the sketch artist had produced the final sketch to Guy, Guy said that looks nothing like the man I saw Olivia and Ben leave with. Except the police didn't care. They pressured and pushed Guy to sign off on that sketch because it needed to be released to the public urgently so everyone could be aware of this mystery man. The next piece of evidence that the police zoned in on was a tiger blanket that was on the bed in Scott's boat, Blade. The tiger blanket obviously was the blanket Scott used on his bed, and so over 400 pieces of hair were collected from this blanket. They were sent to a lab to be looked at, and all they found were 400 short brown hairs on this blanket, probably belonging to Scott because, well, it's his bed and it's his blanket. Except 2 months later, when they just insisted that the lab have a second look, they all of a sudden found 2 long blonde hairs that were from this tiger blanket, which belonged to Olivia. So this was a home run for the police. They now have undeniable proof that Olivia was in Scott's bed. Her hair was on his blanket, which was on his bed, so it all adds up to her being in his bed. But was she really? We don't know, because when the forensic team member who was looking and analyzing these hairs went back to look at them for round 2, they had gotten out Olivia's hair that they had originally obtained from a hairbrush, right? They got the samples of Olivia's hair so that they had a control in this search of the hairs. So they knew what kind of hair they were looking for in case maybe they found a blonde hair, but it wasn't Olivia's. They could match it up or whatnot. So they had Olivia's hair originally to use as a control when comparing it to initially analyzing other hairs. So the lady had gotten Olivia's hair out during round 2 to look at it again, to familiarize herself with what she's looking at. And as she goes back through these 400 strands of hair, she puts the hair back in the bag and moves on to the 400 strands found from the blanket. And then she sees these 2 random blonde hairs. Turns out there was a hole in the baggie that Olivia's hair had been put in. So, despite all the evidence, the hair evidence, if you even want to call it that, because it was just a huge cluster, and the evidence of his boat being super clean, even though he's just a clean dude, and the sketch artist's drawing, all of it, Scott was still arrested on suspicion of a double murder of Olivia and Ben, and he was found guilty, even though there had never been proof of Olivia and Ben's bodies. To this day, there's no proof that Olivia and Ben were even actually killed, which I think that would just make it so hard as a parent or a loved one to never have a body and to just have to assume they're gone forever, because the police clearly did not obtain any concrete evidence, in my opinion. But Scott was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Oliva Hope and Ben Smart, and has to serve a minimum of 17 years before being eligible for parole. And also, I just want to say, can you imagine being his friend and all of a sudden you change your story that Scott arrived at 5 p.m. instead of 1 p.m. because of your weed farm? I mean, I guess I get it. He was willing to save himself over his friend, but imagine how different things would have been had his friend been adamant about Scott being there at his house at 1 p.m. I'm sure the police would have found something else, to whip up. I don't know. But that is all I have for today. You guys will have to let me know what you think. Do you think Scott did it? Do you not? If you were his friend, would you have saved your weed farm and yourself over your friend? You'll have to let me know. But until next time, please remember to be safe, and I will see you then. Bye.